Hello, my name's Carole. Welcome to my sewing room. Would you fancy making some of these? Now, I know that's probably what you're here for, so I'm not going to waffle on, but I will just say that obviously I'm not a professional, I'm not a pattern designer. These are a pair of oven gloves that I made recently. I've made a few using the same method, just using rectangles and obviously curving off the end. The pattern I originally used was tracing over the original ones I had, and that's as simple as it got, but you can do it without that, just by rectangles. I will give you all these sizes. I will give them in inches and centimetres. Obviously I live in the UK, so we are centimetres. I will put them on the screen, but if I have missed anything out, it will be in the description box down below. Now, what you will need is some fabric, obviously front and back. It could be fat quarters because you could join them. Yes, it is quite long, but you can join them in the middle, and I've done that on a recent pair. You will need some heat protector. I use Insul Bright, and I'll put the name down below. It rustles, but you can get a different, completely different fabric, so I will put that down below as well. And you need some cotton batting, which luckily I had. As I said, all the sizes will be down below. And also you need to either make yourself about at least 2 meters of binding, or buy some bias binding, so much easier. The binding I used though was 2.5 inches. But I actually don't know what that is in centimetres. So there we go, I've waffled on enough. As I said, this is a fun project I've done. This pair is actually for myself, so I'm very pleased, but I have given them as gifts and people have used them and they've been very successful. So thank you for joining me. I do hope you enjoy this sew along tutorial, and I hope you get some good oven gloves from it. To make the oven gloves, all I've done is copy off a pattern from an existing pair that I have, and the measurements of this piece and what the finished measurements will be roughly are 35 inches by 7.5 inches, or 89 centimetres by 19 centimetres. So that is what it will be. As you can see, you just need to curve off the ends as much as you want. Now you could do this by using just a plate or the size of a French curve, but you just curve them off. Obviously I've marked my centre, and I've marked where the pockets will actually be. So it's more or less a quarter of the way down. You can see that. Now, rather than actually cutting this exact piece out, I've cut rectangles which are 1/2 inch either side. First of all, because I'm going to quilt it first, then I'm going to lay my pattern piece on top and then cut round. When I just quilted this piece, I found it distorted, so I'm going to do this time on rectangles, and I'll just show you the rectangles that I cut. So this will be for the 2 pocket pieces, so it will be split down the middle, but you've got one layer of, that's the inside fabric, the heat protector, I've got batting, and the top layer of fabric. So that will be like that. Then you've got more or less the same for the the actual gloves themselves. So again, I'm using the same fabric front and back. So I've got fabric, heat protector, some extra batting, and the fabric again. So what will eventually, if you imagine that's cut in half, that will be like that, and then you'll be sliding your hands in there. So what I'm going to do is pin it together, and I'm going to quilt these pieces first this time. I've also, using a fat quarter, I have made about 2 meters of bias binding. Now obviously you can buy this, I've made this up. I'm not a quilter, so I don't know how to properly do it. I think I do it sort of more or less as it should be done, but I will of course put links to somebody that can show you how to do bias binding if you're not sure. So obviously it's all cut on the angle, 45-degree angle. You've got the seams and right angle seams, and I've got 2 meters of that ready to go around the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and quilt these pieces. I've now quilted both my rectangle sections together. So that was the short one for the 2 pockets and the long one. Now I have just done 2-inch squares. What I did was mark it longwise, sew those 3 lines, and then go back and mark the others, because as I said before, when I find I do it, I find they all creep. As you can see the difference in hem there, everything seems to creep and move, even with a walking foot. Now obviously if you're a quilter you'll know exactly what to do, but this is how I've kind of learnt to do it by myself. So yeah, 2-inch squares, so they're all done. I forgot to mention the strips I use for the binding on the outside. They're 2.5-inch strips, so I like them nice and wide, then I don't have to do too much fiddling around. Obviously it's going over a few layers, and the batting that I'm using is a cotton batting. So all I have to do now is get my original piece, and I'm going to pin it on. And then I'm going to cut round it. What you could do first is pin it on, draw round it, pull the piece away, and then lightly baste. Now that would help you as well, so I might actually do that. So I'm going to pin that on, draw round, remove the pattern piece, lightly baste all the way around that line, and then cut it, and then it's all sealed, ready to be binded. So you may be able to see I've drawn around, there's my pen draw lines, that's the heat erasable pen I've used. And then just a couple of millimetres in, I've gone all the way around with a 5mm stitch, cut the wastage off, and that's not too bad. Quite pleased with that because I don't like waste. So I'm going to go on and do the pocket pieces. So what do I need? I need 2 of these end pieces here. So if you remember, that was 1/4 of my long piece, but I have got the rounded end. Now because I've got some lines coming down, I want one of these lines to be at least 1/2 centimetre in from the binding. So I'm going to put the centre of this is where obviously the pocket bit is, I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to put that in the middle of these 2 lines, so I know that I've got a line quite soon. And as with the other one, I'm going to pin around it, just this side, and then I'm going to draw around it, mark it, and then I'll come back to you. So this is my one side cut out, drew around it again, and I top stitched it round. And this piece, now what I've got to make sure is I keep this up the right way, that I don't end up with one pocket being upside down and one pocket being that way around. So what I'm going to do is, poor Winnie the Pooh, I chopped his face in half. I'm just going to flip it like that, draw around this as I did before, top stitch, and then cut it out. So I should have them both the right way up. So what have we got so far? We've got the big long piece, and we have our 2 end pieces, which will be our pockets. If I show you them both, and as you can see, they're going to go that way. I'm going to keep that inside. I couldn't decide whether that goes inside or outside, but I'm actually going to keep it inside. So what we need to do now is think about the hoop. Obviously you're going to need to hang this up. So this piece of fabric here, I cut 6 inches by 3 inches. I've folded it in half and half again. And what you're going to do now is just sew top stitch either side of there. So I've folded it in half, found my centre. I'm going to flip that, and I'm going to stitch them facing down into the glove, just to keep them in the right place for when I'm putting the binding on. So there you go, we don't need to worry about that. What we do, of course, need to do is bind these edges first, and that's lovely because they're just straight. I'm going to use some of my binding to do exactly that. I'm going to bind the edges. I've pressed my binding in half now, and I've measured off 2 bits that I needed, just with a little bit spare. This is how I like to do it, and you can do it however you want to do, but on the wrong side I'm going to sew 6mm along the edge there, so you've got the fold away from you and the raw edges, all the raw edges together. I will then trim if I need to, flip over, and I then top stitch that down so you can see that, because I find trying to stitch in the ditch doesn't really work for me. So this I find is the easiest way of doing it. So I'm going to stitch 6mm there, and they're going to flip over and then top stitch that down. I'll do it both for both sides of the pocket. There we go, we got the binding on, and I've top stitched right to the edge. I said 6mm, I mean 1/4 of an inch for your inch people. Now comes the part where we're going to clip these pockets on, and then I'm going to run each side, and I'm going to run another basting stitch so I can squidge as much of this together as I can before I put the binding on. You can see my stitching this time because I've changed it already for the reds, but they are beginning to look like oven gloves, as you can see. So all that's left now is to add the binding, and I'm going to do it in exactly the same way. I'm going to count the inside being my wrong side. I'm going to go all the way around and then flip it to the outside. Now there are a couple of different ways of joining the binding when you get together, when you go all the way around and you've got the 2 pieces together. I'm going to link a tutorial. I'm going to find you the one that I use and link the tutorial. They best explain how to do it, because every time I do it, it works perfectly, but I can never remember and have to check on the tutorial. You could always go onto anybody else's quilting channel and find out how to do that, but that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go all the way around on the binding. I've sewn the binding onto the wrong side, and I'm going to flip it over, as I said, onto the what I'm calling the right side, the proper side. I just wanted to say that if you're like me and you're not particularly accurate, and you might have some bits that are fatter than other where the binding is going to squeeze, you can always trim some of it off. I think it's more or less all right when you pull the binding over, but if you do have some bits that you weren't particularly accurate on, you can just trim those down. No worries, it's only an oven glove. And then obviously you've got the bit with the hoop, that there. You could also afterwards flip that up and top stitch down, but I think it's okay just in that line of stitching there, top stitching there. I think that'll hold. So all you've got to do is flip it that way, and you could clip it and then sew top stitch all the way around. Here we go, the finished oven gloves, and I am so pleased how they came out. Even more pleased because these are actually for me. So sewn the binding, top stitch all the way around the outside. Obviously now the loop is enclosed. You could put some stitching there if you wanted, but I don't think it's necessary. Really happy with them. The only thing I would say, it is not perfect, and nothing I ever do is perfect. What I forgot to do when I did the top stitching in red here, I forgot to put the bobbin in cream, so you have got a line of red stitching on the inside. Just be warned of that if you've got 2 very strong colours. As I say, it's only here and there, and these are for me, so I'm not too worried. But if I had put the bobbin colour, top in red, bobbin in cream, that would not have been so noticeable. But I am really being picky, I think, because I'm pleased with them. I think I've said it before, but the rustling sound is the heat, the Insul Bright, which I've used. You can get other stuff similar that doesn't rustle, but it doesn't bother me. So really happy oven gloves. I hope you, if you have a go, have fun with this project. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said before, I am not a professional and very often I make up patterns myself, but I do love to share my ideas. I will put a playlist at the end of other things that I've come across and made, you know, as I go along in my sewing room. I do hope you've enjoyed this and I hope you have success. Please let me know in the comments if you do try. Thanks again and I will see you soon. Goodbye for now.